how was NAMM for you?
You know, NAMM was good. It's been a long time since I've been to a NAMM show. I think when the first time I went there was like 95, and I was there at the behest of Rivera Amps, and that's how I always thought the thing went. You know, you get a promoter or a sponsor to bring you out there. And then for the longest time, you know, nobody paid me to go out there, which it's not to say I had an attitude about it, just, you know, I was always playing, you know, I was always busy. But if the opportunity arose or somebody wanted to have me out there, I would have taken it. But it was okay. I mean, for a while there, I was feeling a little bit irrelevant because to be totally honest, I mean, my star's waning, you know. I mean, I've still got my hardcore fans out there. And I'll always be forever grateful for Texas Sugar for doing that. I mean, that's still one of my biggest selling CDs when I'm out there on the road. But it was okay. I mean, after I got into it and started going around to all my endorsers and then some people, I mean, you recognized me. That felt good, you know. It's so funny the way you kind of jumped down the line.
Very cool, actually, to have run into you there, you know, in that sea of madness at NAMM.
Exactly. I mean, especially it was pretty noticeable when it went from Thursday to Friday and Saturday how thick the crowds got. And but you know, seeing a lot of cool musicians and seeing a lot of musicians that I really admire that are like you said, just walking down the aisles. It's like, I mean, first day I think I saw Lee Sklar there. And I think that's how you say his name. I mean, and I was trying to tell my wife who he is. It's like that guy has played with everybody, literally everybody. I think from everybody from Carole King and James Taylor to, I think he's on the Spectrum album, Billy Cobham's Spectrum album. I mean, God, what a guy.
Yeah,
and Steve Bailey was there and stuff. Steve Bailey's an old friend of mine and stuff. So.
What part of the world are you living in now?
I live now in Atlanta. I moved here in 2005.
I read a bit of your biography and some things stuck out in my mind.
Okay.
What is it about Fiddler on the Roof that made you want to push your musical career, or is that even true?
No, it's true. It's
okay.
True. It was just one of those moments, those impressionable moments that you have when you're young. And I think it was the TV debut, you know, network TV debut when it came on, I guess back in the mid-'70s. And it just, for some reason, I thought it looked so cool. It was such an impressionable, iconic sort of image. You know, whereas a lot of iconic images were a figure is silhouetted against a night sky somehow, and on top of the roof, and he's in that haunting line, you know, it just really struck a chord in me. No pun intended there, but it struck it, and I immediately turned to my mom and I said, I want to play the violin. But the school had too many violin players.
So did you ever end up starting to play violin, or?
No, never did. And I always say, I went to the school, and I said I want to play violin, you know, signed up, got in line for the orchestra. And they said, we have too many violin players. How about clarinet? I was like, okay, clarinet. I was still like gullible and naive, and okay, clarinet, fine. I'll play music. I don't care what it is. And I went back to my mom. And I still remember my mom. I believe my image of her was she was sitting in bed knitting. Women did back in those days, or at least my mom was doing it. And she goes, no, you're not playing the clarinet. She didn't want to hear clarinet in the house. But as I say, the seed was planted, you know. So I wanted to do something. So it lay dormant for a while until some sort of life elixir made it down to it and germinated it, you know. I think that was my brother getting a guitar, my older brother getting.
Now, it's kind of funny how your story is kind of in line with Stevie's story, like, you know, him yoinking his brother's guitar and, like, excelling on it. I read that as well, that your brother basically loaned you a guitar or passed you his guitar, and that's what became of it, basically.
Right, my brother never punched me in the nose and broke my nose, as the legend goes with Stevie and Jimmy, but, yeah, I mean, it was me always constantly picking up my brother's guitar, and he had a classical guitar, or nylon string. And so then my mom said, well, we're going to buy you a guitar. But yeah, I just seemed to be, I picked it up faster. I didn't understand if somebody knew the song, and especially if you had the chords, like the Beatles books, like it's like, this is so easy, unless it was like a really, one of the difficult songs I remember running around the Beatles books, I think was like a Mr. Kite. Those chords were weird. But if it was just an easy old song, I just couldn't understand why somebody couldn't get it. You know, all my friends, it's like, I just showed you the chords, you know, the song goes, it goes like this. And they just couldn't do it. That's when I kind of realized, well, maybe I do have something.
Guitar question. That original $500 63 L Series Strat, what's the real story behind that?
Okay, well, the L Series one, the one that was ripped off from me, and that it says "Please Call Home," that guitar.
Yeah.
That guitar, that one I bought when I was still 16 years old, and I had gotten it from this guy that worked in a music store. He was like this local guitar hero that I had met through a drummer friend that I went to high school with. I think his name was Hugo, and it was still in its tweed case and everything, you know. And he had it refinished. It was a refin too, and this is when pre-CBSs were just starting to get their hallowed status. You know, the legend was growing behind it. Because everybody, I remember back in the mid-'70s to late '70s, everybody started talking about, well, is it pre-CBS Strat, pre-CBS? And he had one for sale. And since I was young and people kind of thought I had something, I was kind of a special player, he sold it to me for $500. And I remember I bought it, and it was, I went down to the music store and worked downtown in San Antonio, Caldwell Music. I think it's still there. And it was totally all apart. He said, oh, it's been under my bed, you know, just in its case for like a year or two. So it was totally all apart. We took it to my friend's house, we put it all together. The only way teenagers know how to put together a Strat, no schematic or anything, we kind of just worked it. And of course, before the days of the internet, when you can just go on there and get a schematic offline. And so we put it together, and then I took it to Austin, because at that time I just started living in Austin. I moved to Austin in December '79. I was still 16, and there I was getting on a Greyhound bus with a tweed case, walking around. You know, I remember I walked into this music store in Austin. It was the first one. It was called Picker's Paradise, and this is a long time ago. Any old musician in Austin would know this store. There's Ray Hennigs, and of course then there's Picker's Paradise. And Picker's Paradise started the deal where you got 2-for-1 string packs, you know, and they were the first one. And then after they started that, everybody had to sell strings like that in Austin. You had to sell it 2-for-1. So I remember walking in there for my lessons, my jazz lessons, and I was walking in there in my tweed case, and this guy just looks at me, an older guy. Probably, he looked older to me. He was probably in his late 30s, you know, and Era was all of 17. And he goes, it ought to be against the law, 17-year-old walking around with a tweed case. But that's how I carried that guitar around. I mean, it was just, there were no soft cases back then. You know, this was the case of a guitar, this old tweed case.
Right. Now, it's funny, I didn't know that story until just this morning. I asked one of our Facebook users if they had any questions, and they asked about this guitar that apparently got stolen. How did that happen?
The way it got stolen, you know, to this day, I can still, besides the level of my playing, you know, discerning the level of my playing, but when a bootleg tape is put in, I could tell that guitar, because that guitar just had this really, really special tone. And I don't know if it's been over the years, if it's been, my ears have shaped it that way because the fondness I have for it. But that guitar just had such a great, great tone to it. So we went to New York City. It's one of our first times in New York City, and I just loved that city. I loved it for the energy that it had. And this is when Brandon Temple was in band. This is the Texas Sugar Band. And we went in there. We had a couple gigs, and we were just starting to be courted by Silvertone Records, Michael Tedesco. We had already been introduced to him. He was running around with us. And we got in a day early, and we parked the car near 9th and Lexington. And we just had a Ford Aerostar van, and we had all our equipment in the back. And it was classic. It was almost like a comedy show. We said, we better cover up the equipment. So here we are, opening up the back of the van, covering it up with this blanket. Everybody in the world could see this isn't the greatest neighborhood, but we didn't know. You know, we were we're indestructible, you know. So we're covering it all up. We lock it up. And we go have this great meal actually at this nice restaurant, and then we come back and we look in the back, and most of the shit was gone. A lot of shit was gone. My guitar was gone. One of my Echoplexes were gone. They stole the drummer's suitcase, and they stole our bass player's bass, the 7-string Conklin, which we still haven't found. And you'd think it'd be hard to hide that thing.
Yeah, no
so,
kidding.
and I mean, even that thing disappeared. We've never heard it hide nor hair from it, or splinter. We've never heard anything about that guitar. And that was one of the early Conklins. When Bill Conklin was making them out of his shop in the back of his house. So, and it was like, I couldn't believe it. It was almost surreal for like 10 minutes. And yeah, I'll admit it, I cried like a motherfucker.
So 11 records, man, several tours, 2 instructional DVDs, which has kind of brought you to the point of Blues in the Afterburner. Now, great record, by the way. Really great record. I really, when I listen to it, you can hear almost a little bit of everything that you have done over the years. It goes from like traditional to, again, out of the box style music. Now, when you were going into recording that, was that conscious? Like, did you really want to bring everything that you've done over the years to the table and try and get that on tape, or was it just natural?
How the process has been going, like for the last 4 or 5 records, working with Mike Varney, especially the last 2, the MO that we've had is like, it's almost a more pragmatic business approach, because it's like, Mike will be like, we need to get a distributor for Europe, and the distributor's been bitching about having not enough blues on the records. And of course, I want to go out. I want to start still going outside the box. And then I also want to, pursue like there's that I've Been a Fool song on there. I want to start doing kind of songs like that, sort of Beatle-ish and sort of country-ish and sort of, and Mike's been kind of saying we just need a bit more blues. We need to do that. So that's why I've been putting a lot more blues and shuffles. I want, the way Mike operates is, when I first started working with him, I'd write the lyrics, and then he would help me shape the melody line that I had for the songs. The way I write songs is I come up with a rhythm first, a form, and then I'll start putting a melody on top of that. Very few times I have come up with the melody first. He would literally say, stop, 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 that doesn't sound good, let's take it up from there. And so we build the solos. But now I guess I've taken it as an indication he's gotten more confident. He thinks my phrasing's gotten better, because now he's letting me go on longer with my solos. There's less of the stop, stop, stop. You have to stop that, don't do that. And at first it was kind of irritating to do that, because it's like literally you're pulling the plug out of me, because I'm so invested in it emotionally, everything to it. At the end of the day, though, you have to not be married to this stuff, because they could chop it up and move it around. So the only thing I'm married to sometimes is if it's a message I'm really trying to convey with the lyrics. That I get a little touchy with those sometimes. Little modifications I don't care, but when they start messing with how I feel the story should go, or how the message should go in the songs, I get a little testy with that. But that's how Mike and I have operated, building songs together. There was one record we did, Vantage Point, and there's a song on there called The End of Me and You. And that one sort of took on like a Steely Dan sort of twist to it, because he wanted me to do some sort of minor, sort of Thrill Is Gone, like a raised fifth, on the turnaround, the raise the sixth, and then go to the fifth, and then, then the fourth and one. And I came up with it, and then what I do is I listen to the song over and over and over and try to come up with the melody line. And for some reason, I just couldn't do it. And I finally went into him like the last day we were tracking, doing solos, and I said, I can't come up with the melody line. He goes, okay. So we literally got in there, and there's this grand piano in one of the rooms, and we're hunched over a grand piano both of us, with our sleeves rolled up, a la, like Tin Pan Alley in the 20s, and we're scratching out these lyrics and scratching out a line. That sounds great. Let's go put it in. Let's get it on. Get a vocal template, and then we'll polish it. And so that was really cool. And so Mike, ever since Mike and I did that song, we kind of have gotten addicted to the process when we get together. And I think I'm the only artist that comes in there and we create together. Whereas Eric Gales comes in, Eric Gales might have 3-4 melodic ideas, and then Mike writes the bulk of those tunes. Mike writes probably 90% of those tunes on Eric's album. But Eric's such a phenomenal player, he carries it just great, He's almost like, I'd say working like Jeff Beck, because Jeff Beck, a lot of those tunes aren't his tunes, but he's just that incredible interpreter, that comes in and just plays great,
It's kind of cool that you've given us a little bit more insight into Mike Varney. So Mike has worked with you as a co-producer on all those records.
All the records. In fact, I first met Mike when we were out. It was before Texas Sugar was released, and this was me, Brandon, and John, the Texas Sugar Band, and we were out touring, and we played Mill Valley, a place called Sweetwaters in Mill Valley, and Mike was there. And this has got to be like 94. And I remember I was out back, it was on break, and Mike came out, and Mike sort of told me who he was. And I knew who he was because he was doing that spotlight column in the back of Guitar Player magazine, the very last page.
Yeah.
So, but I totally knew him of that stuff because, I remember the issue with Tony McAlpine in it, him gushing about it and everything, and some other players. But anyway, so he goes, yeah, you kind of remind me of like John McLaughlin and doing that. And I was like, I can't believe you picked that out because that's like one of my total guitar idols is McLaughlin. The Miles Beyond solo just so totally turned my head around when I heard that, and how the drums and the guitar can work together, and so that sort of changed me, that solo of Birds of Fire, the Miles Beyond solo. But anyway, so from then on, we've kind of kept in touch. And then when I was leaving or being dropped by Silvertone after the second album, Mike Varney got in with it. Mike Varney wanted to have me on his label. And so then my lawyer was like, oh, we're going to turn this into a bidding war. And we're going to turn it in between Rounder Records and Mike. And it had gotten up to, I think, that the advance, this is when record companies were still giving advances back in those days. And we had gotten up to $50,000. And Mike bowed out, and Rounder took me. And which happened to be a good thing because whereas Rounder could kind of afford a hit like that, Mike couldn't have afforded a hit like that. But who knows what the third album would have turned out to be like. Because the third album turned out to be Love's Greater Than Me, which was, we got Doyle Bramall Sr. to produce it, and we did it in Austin at a friend of mine's studio, but it was still a legitimate studio. It turned out okay. I like it. I still like the way it sounds. But it was a different, because I had gone from being Silvertone, this big label, lots of money, this huge PR machine behind you, to Rounder, this sort of grassroots type sort of label. And they were enthused about it, but, I think I did a disservice to myself too, because the way the contract was set up, it was set up as, we're going to give you a budget. This is your budget, which means it's not like all the other ones were, okay, go into the studio, this is what we'd like to spend for this record, but go into the studio, do the tracks. When it's given to you as a budget, and it's put under as a budget, that means anything left over, you get to keep. So instead of me thinking, I want the best product possible, we're going to spend till this money's gone. We want to make it sound good. Just keep spending the money, just keep going for the sound you need. When the money runs out, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. No, my second wife, she saw what we could do, and she went on to get her MBA in business. Her decision was, let's try to make as much money off this album as possible and try to save as much. So yeah, I think we did the album for $22,000, and we kept the rest. And I remember, what was his name? The A&R guy at Rounder. I remember when he was looking over at the figure, and he was like, wow, you really made out on this album. And he knew there was nothing he could do about it. But I could tell that now in hindsight, I can tell in his voice, he was like, motherfucker, you only spent $21,000. It's pretty obvious what your intentions were. You were going to make a cheap album, you know. But it did okay, you know. But then we did one more album. We got the first producer, Dennis Herring, who did Texas Sugar. And it kind of still had that raw quality. But it was different, you know.
Yeah, I noticed that about your records over the years, that they're all very different. There are, subtle differences on some. I mean, obviously, Texas Sugar was raw, off the floor, like real live energy, and you can hear it all.